What's up, guys? JT Anime and Nerd here, bringing you all that nerdy goodness. Today, we continue my version of the DC Extended Universe slash Snyderverse with the Green Lantern movie titled The Green Lantern. This movie will be an original written story by me and take place before Man of Steel, mainly around the time of Jonathan Kent's death. I know the Aquaman movie came next after Justice League, but I feel that after a big crossover movie, you'd want to introduce a new hero, especially the type of hero that shows up at the end of the crossover movie, as John Stewart's Green Lantern and Kilowog make an appearance at the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League. However, this movie is actually going to revolve around Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, being that he was the so-and-so, the second in of Earth's Green Lantern, and the one before John Stewart. Unless I'm missing something, because all I know is that Alan Scott was the original Green Lantern. I hope you guys enjoy this original story, but before I start, don't forget to Hulk smash that subscribe button if you want to help this channel grow. So without further ado, let's get into it. The story begins with Abin attempting to escape from a group of yellow glowing robots that are chasing down his pod. Abin uses every weapon in his pod's arsenal to fend off the robots, but ultimately gets his pod damaged and hurtling toward the Milky Way galaxy. Meanwhile, on an unknown planet, a pink-skinned alien wearing a glowing yellow suit is staring at a giant strange machine while phantom voices begin to echo from his ring. The robots approach and ask the alien if they should continue to pursue, with the alien saying yes, but he will join them in pursuing Abin as well. Now that he's cornered. Meanwhile, on Earth, Hal Jordan, an Air Force pilot portrayed by Tom Cruise, is on active duty in Afghanistan and is flying in a new experimental jet. After bringing down a few enemy jets, Hal is informed by his superior officer to return to base. However, Hal notices that a friend of his is pinned down by enemy jets and attempts a rescue. However, Hal's commanding officer orders him to return to base, but Hal refuses and goes rogue, eventually saving his fellow Air Force pilot. Back at the Air Force base in the U.S., Hal is being reprimanded for defying orders at the mercy of his commanding officer. Hal argues the merits of how anyone in their right mind would just leave a soldier to die. Hal's commanding officer responds by dishonorably discharging Hal, as this isn't his first offense at insubordination, followed by stating that morality has no place in war, and that the key value of a soldier is to follow orders and die for the greater good of their country. Before the discharge is carried out, however, Carol Ferris steps into the room, stating that to penalize Hal would bring a bad impression on the Air Force's higher-ups, as the soldier Hal saved is the son of a politician that supports the Air Force, this ultimately saving Hal Jordan from being discharged at all. As Carol and Hal leave the building, Hal thanks Carol for saving his job, but Carol warns him that he can't keep acting so recklessly. Hal argues he's not the kind of person to just trade lives away and can't just sit by when he knows he can save a fellow soldier in arms. Carol states that she understands, but reminds Hal that he got lucky this time for saving a politician's son, but then reveals that the sad reality of saving him from being court-martialed was to have him honorably discharged, admitting that he won't go on any more tours. Hal has a hard time understanding why they could just throw away good soldiers like that, with Carol simply stating that it's the reality of being a soldier, followed by Carol taking her leave. Moments later, at a shelter for homeless vets in Coast City, Hal looks around in shock, witnessing people who fought for their country left in bad conditions. Some are even struggling to survive, and most don't even have a home. Hal then meets up with his friend John Stewart, the architect of the shelter, who also loves to spend time there with his fellow former soldiers in arms, who Hal Jordan refers to as the master builder of Coast City himself. More moments later, John is filled in on Hal's situation involving his discharge. John states that he can relate, revealing that he was ordered to do something unforgivable that would have cost innocents their lives, but refused to do it and threatened to expose his commanding officer, leading to his own honorable discharge. Hal rants about how the people they fought so hard for can just treat them like weapons, with John stating that in war, they are weapons that sign away their lives and call it an act for the greater good. However, John goes on to say that while they are soldiers of the government, they decide what kind of soldier they want to be, and that they always have the free will to do so. After thinking on this for a moment, Carol approaches Hal and John and tells Hal that she may have found a way for Hal to keep making money from his Air Force experience. Carol reveals that the politician whose son Hal saved was helping to fund a new flight simulator, and Hal was recommended for the job. At first, Hal was skeptical, but Carol reveals that despite his honorable discharge, his commanding officer is looking for ways to cut his pension. So this will at least get him money he needs to continue living should that ever happen. The next day near sunset, Hal enters the flight simulator and prepares for testing over a desert. After being given the go-ahead, Hal eventually takes off and seemingly begins to get the hang of the simulator. As the sun is setting, however, Hal begins to notice what appears to be a fireball falling from the sky, only for it to pass him at a breakneck speed and suddenly knock him off course. While he did survive, Hal ended up crashing right near where the fireball had landed. After exiting the flight simulator, Hal would approach the crash-landed fireball only to find out that it's a space pod holding an alien in it. Despite his shock, Hal notices that the alien seems to be hurt and sending out a distress signal to anyone who can hear him, but to no avail. Following his instincts, Hal ran to the alien and helped him out of his pod. As he lay dying, he asks Hal his name, and introduces himself as Abin Sur. Just then, Abin Sur's ring leaves Abin Sur's finger and approaches Hal, making Abin Sur realize that his time is up. After explaining that the ring has chosen him, Abin Sur gives Hal his power battery and tells Hal to state the oath and the bequeathing will be done. At first, Hal tries to shrug off the ring and tells Abin Sur that he'll get him help, but Abin Sur insists, making it clear that he doesn't have much time left. Wanting to give Abin Sur his dying wish, he follows his instructions to put on the ring and place it within the power battery. As Hal does this, he sees a vision of a faraway planet, followed by Hal Jordan stating the oath as if it was programmed into his head. In brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let all those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light. After stating this oath, Abin Sur's suit dematerializes and then rematerializes onto Hal Jordan, giving him his iconic Green Lantern mask as well. Before dying in Hal's arms, Abin Sur tells Hal to beware the Yellow Lantern. Just as the military was closing in on Hal, his Green Lantern ring whisked him off a planet, leaving the military and Carol to end up finding Abin Sur, the pod, and an empty, destroyed flight simulator. Meanwhile, Hal's ring brings him to the planet Oa, the base planet of the Green Lanterns. Hal arrives and looks around at the wondrous city, the lanterns all flying around, seeing the grave sites of multiple lanterns, and even sees the central power battery of Oa in the distance. Hal is then approached by two aliens who introduce themselves as Tomar Ray, voiced by Hugh Laurie, the recruitment ambassador of the Green Lanterns, and Kilowog, voiced by Brad Garrett, who acts as the training officer for new recruits. As Hal is slightly panicked and hyperventilating, Tomar calms him down by explaining the planet Oa, the place where Green Lanterns come and go from duty. Hal asks what a lantern is, Tomar replying that the Green Lantern Corps patrols and protects the universe from intergalactic threats. Hal then reluctantly realizes that it seems what humans have always thought was right, that they were never alone in the universe. However, Tomar explains that allowing Earthlings to believe extraterrestrial life didn't exist was the Guardians' way of protecting them after the last Green Lanterns that were there died. Hal asks who the Guardians are, to which Kilowog explains that the Guardians of the Universe are just that, Guardians who founded the Green Lantern Corps who have charged themselves with the welfare of the universe as they see fit. Tomar then reluctantly explains that they are the reason they have met up with Hal, as the Guardians question a human Green Lantern due to history and with Earthlings, much to Hal's curiosity. Moments later, Tomar and Kilowog escort Hal to the Guardians of the Universe. The Guardian Ganthet, voiced by Ian McKellen, introduces his name and gives off a compassionate impression while his fellow Guardians appear cold and distant. Other than Ganthet, the Guardians casually discuss if they should accept or dispose of Hal Jordan, even contemplate killing him. However, Hal openly refuses the position, stating that he just wanted to give a dying man his last wish, surprising Tomar, Kilowog, and even the Guardians. Hal then explains that a pinkish-skinned alien fell from the sky and was dying, and that he asked that his last wish be him saying some kind of oath. Tomar then recognizes that Abin Sur has died after hearing those words, much to Hal's curiosity. The Guardians then explain that Abin was charged with patrolling Sector 2814, the very sector the Milky Way galaxy exists in. The Guardians, now recognizing a sector unpatrolled, now feels that if the ring has chosen an Earthling, then perhaps he can make himself useful in the defense of Sector 2814. The Guardians then ask Hal if he knows how Abin crash landed, with Hal replying that he just said to beware the Yellow Lantern, leading the Guardians to dismiss Hal and charge Tomar and Kilowog with his training. As the trio take their leave, Ganthet reminds the Guardians that he warned that this would happen, and that he has returned. One of the Guardians states that this has to be impossible, and that they thought they took care of him. The female Guardian states that they'll send their best lanterns to the planet Xanshi to find him, for that is where he would be. Meanwhile, on Earth and at Area 51, scientists, soldiers, and even Carol Ferris are inspecting the pod in Abinsur's body. Before the autopsy can begin on the body, the electricity begins to flicker, as well as loud bangs can be heard throughout the building. Just then, the robots that were chasing Abinsur in space crash into the room, holding the people in the room hostage and kill those who resist, with the exception of Carol due to her getting knocked into a pile of discarded metal materials and being able to hide in the pile. Just then, the Yellow Lantern, portrayed by Luke Evans, slowly descends through the hole in the ceiling, followed by going up to the body of Abinsur and genuinely mourns his death. The Yellow Lantern then speaks to Abinsur's body, stating that he hopes Abinsur's soul somehow finds peace within the green flame. The Yellow Lantern then turns to the hostage and introduces himself as Sinestro, stating that this man landed on this planet with a green ring, asking if anyone knows who has it. As everyone remains silent, Sinestro asks if they are afraid, to which their expression and nods confirm as such, with Sinestro responding that it's good that they are afraid. Sinestro then goes on to state that fear is survival, fear is life, and that fear is what peace truly looks like. Just then, a soldier pulls out his gun, only for Sinestro to create a construct of an alien serpentine creature and wraps it around the soldier's hands and neck. Sinestro then explains that fear and willpower, however, will bring death, followed by Sinestro snapping the soldier's neck, killing him instantly. Sinestro then tells those who are afraid of him to step forward, having the robots let the hostages go. Sinestro then presents these scared humans with multiple Yellow Lantern power rings. Those who are afraid end up becoming Yellow Lanterns and fall under the control of the yellow energy. But one colonel in the room is rejected by one of the rings, revealing to be not afraid of Sinestro. Sinestro genuinely apologizes that he's not afraid, followed by killing him with a dagger construct. Carol looks on from under the pile of metal material she's hiding under in fear as Sinestro and the Yellow Lanterns take their leave. Back on Oa, Hal begins his training montage, with Tomar stating that the Green Lantern ring can construct anything out of the green light of willpower, and that the only limit is one's imagination. Hal begins with simple constructs like swords and guns, but shows that he doesn't have the training to handle them, leading Kilowog to teach Hal physical combat training, as well as training with certain constructs. The montage shows Hal's progression in training, from not being able to handle and create certain constructs to mastering his ring's powers. Meanwhile, on the barren planet of Xanshi, units of Green Lanterns led by a lantern named Boudica looks around and scans the area for life forms, only to eventually be ambushed by a group of robots that one Green Lantern refers to as Manhunters. As many of the Green Lanterns are killed, few of them end up being captured by the Manhunters, including Boudica. Back on Oa after a couple weeks of training, Tomar tells Hal to charge his ring in his power battery every couple of hours or the ring's energy output will run out, as well as explain that the ring's sentient and acts like an artificial intelligence and will assist him when he needs it. Hal then does as Tomar says and charges his ring. Tomar then demonstrates his ring's sentience by asking it how many planets exist in the Milky Way solar system, with the ring's automated voice replying that the Milky Way solar system is comprised of 8 planets. Just then, Hal and friends look up to find many Green Lanterns heading over to the central power battery, a place that Tomar explains is mostly used for meetings. Hal and friends then follow the crowd and end up at a meeting held by Helvanite, an alien squirrel. Helvanite I tells the Lanterns that a distress signal from a missing Green Lantern has been sent from planet Alo in Sector 2828, which is under attack by the Dominators. The Guardians have decreed that 3 units are to be sent in assistance to battle and aid in evacuation of civilians, that being Unit Alpha, Unit Beta, and Unit Sigma, which is Tomar's unit. Tomar then points out that the people of Alo have refused their help for years and asks why they would want their help now. Helvanite simply states that they don't know why they've changed their minds. He only knows that their orders are to save the planet. Despite being skeptical, Hal and company leave to address planet Alo's problems. Back on Xanshi, the Manhunters escort the remaining Green Lanterns on the planet and present them to Sinestro, accompanied by the members of his new corps. Boudica is then stunned to see Earthlings with yellow power rings, with Sinestro stating that they are but the first few in his new corps, and they may be free to join as well. Boudica then states that she'd rather die than join him. Sinestro is then given her Green Lantern power ring by the Manhunter who apprehended her, followed by Sinestro kneeling down to Boudica's level. Sinestro then calls Boudica a poor girl and states that the Guardians really have brainwashed her with their lies, but fear shall be hers and everyone's salvation. Grasping her ring in his hand, Sinestro transforms Boudica's ring into a yellow lantern ring. The Manhunter then forces Boudica's hand out, with Sinestro placing the yellow ring on her finger, stating that her fears shall turn her from a mindless soldier into a warrior of freedom. Boudica then transforms into a yellow lantern under Sinestro's control. Just then, a phantom voice from Sinestro's ring informs him of what's happening on planet Alo, being able to sense Abin's ring. Sinestro feels relief in finding out where Abin's ring has gone to. Boudica asks Sinestro if he wishes them to accompany him, but Sinestro states that it was time he met with his old friend's successor face to face. Meanwhile, on planet Alo, Dominators are fighting against Alan soldiers, as well as killing many civilians trying to run away. As the units arrive, Helvanite orders everyone to focus on the battle and evacuating civilians. Hal then looks on and sees many injured Alan soldiers, still alive despite being gravely wounded. Hal then points out to Helvanite that the soldiers on the battlefield need assistance as well. However, Helvanite states that they are to only focus on what the Guardians order them to do. Helvanite then orders all units to do as they're told, leading them to spread across the planet. As Tomar and Kilowog are about to take their leave, they notice Hal looking on in the battlefield, mortified at the sight. As Tomar tries to tell Hal that he can't save everyone, Hal states that they at least have to try, and asks Tomar and Kilowog to help him save the wounded soldiers. Tomar states that to defy the Guardians is to risk great penalty, sometimes even death depending on the offense. Hal then tells Tomar to look out on that battlefield, and states that all life is worth fighting for, even if there's zero to little hope in saving everyone. Tomar agrees, but warns Hal of the repercussions, as well as how it will affect the mission. Hal then states that the mission is simple: protect the weak. As Hal flies toward the battlefield, Kilowog expresses how he's beginning to like Hal, with Tomar in agreement, and so agrees in turn to aid Hal in his endeavor with Kilowog following behind him. As the Green Lantern units push back the Dominator soldiers and help evacuate alien civilians, Helvanite notices Tomar's group acting on their own, with Helvanite attempting to warn the group that they will be reported for insubordination. Tomar then cleverly and politely insults Helvanite, openly defying his command. As an alien soldier is at the mercy of a Dominator, Hal, Tomar, and Kilowog act quickly, saving as many soldiers as they can, and while also pushing back the Dominator frontline army. After saving what was left of the soldiers, the Green Lanterns decide to take the opportunity to push back the Dominators as best they can. Meanwhile, as Hal and company scour the battlefield for more fallen soldiers, Hal asks his ring if there are any life forms on the battlefield left, with his ring stating that there is one left, revealed to be a fallen Green Lantern. Tomar then confirms that she is Nagila Aganur, his lover. Hal, Tomar, and Kilowog are able to wake Nagila up, who confirms that she was charged with protecting Sector 2828 and even reveals that she sent the distress signal. Tomar asks her what happened, with Nagila stating that Aelin has been asking for the Guardians for help for many years, but never received an answer, and so the Fallen Lantern knew that a distress signal was sent straight to another Green Lantern was something that could not be ignored. Tomar is confused as to why the Guardians would ignore a distress call, with the fallen Green Lantern stating that they refused but they didn't care. To the Guardians, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Nagila dies in Tomar's arms, leaving Tomar in despair, her ring leaving to find another to choose, and thanking the group for at least coming to her rescue at the moment they saw her. Nagila even telling Tomar that she loves him. Just then, Helvanite and the remaining Green Lanterns succeed in pushing the Dominators back to their base on the planet and rendezvous with Tomar. Helvanite scolds the group for defying orders, especially from the Guardians, but Hal reveals what Nagila had just told them, spurring confusion and slight panic among the remaining Green Lanterns present. Helvanite tries to justify and defend the Guardians' decision, stating that the Lantern should have done on her job. Tomar then snaps at Helvanite in anger, claiming that Nagila was a person and didn't deserve to die out here, believing that her own people would not rescue her. Suddenly, the Dominator base explodes, causing the Green Lanterns to be pushed away and spread out across the battlefield. As the dust settles, Hal and many other Green Lanterns look upon the Dominator base, destroyed along with the Dominators. Hal and company then look as they see faint yellow lights, revealing themselves to be Sinestro and his corps of Yellow Lanterns. Sinestro then proclaims that it was planet Alo's fear that brought them, and now it shall be their salvation. Sinestro then begins to spread multiple Yellow Lantern rings to the people of Alo, who are afraid and therefore vulnerable to the Yellow Power Ring's control. As the Green Lanterns look on in shock, Tomar and Kilowog are shocked to see Sinestro, someone they seem to know very well. As Sinestro looks down to face Hal Jordan, he then flies over to him as Hal readies himself for battle. As Sinestro looks at Hal's ring, he recognizes it as Abin Sur's ring and is surprised to find that it's chosen an Earthling. Not in the mood for talking, Hal uses as many creative constructs as he needs to defeat Sinestro, but is easily overpowered, with Sinestro stating that while he may look like a lantern, he is far from one. However, Sinestro states that it's not too late for him and asks him to give in to his fears before he falls into the lies told by the Guardians. Sinestro's words confusing Hal. Not wanting to be discouraged, Hal continues to fight, but is still easily overcome by Sinestro's skill and prowess. Sinestro then states that he was once like Hal, a believer in the Guardians' quest for peace and to defeat evil, but learned the hard way that in reality true peace can only be found in fear. Sinestro then reaches out his hand to Hal, genuinely asking him to come to him and to come to Parallax. Just then, Hal's ring reacts, creating an energy field around him, and swiftly escorts him back to Oa, just as the rings of the other Green Lanterns do the same. Just then, an alien Yellow Lantern asks what Sinestro plans to do now, with him replying that he's returning to Xanshi and asks his new recruit to help him send a message to Oa. Back on Oa, the Green Lantern units all return, but in smaller numbers than they left. Without hesitation, Tomar flies over to where the Guardians make council, with Hal and Kilowog following behind. Tomar swoops in anger and reprimands the Guardians for lying and telling them that Sinestro was dead. One of the Guardians warns Tomar to watch his tongue, just as Hal and Kilowog arrive behind Tomar. Ganthet then explains that they've had their suspicions, but could not prove them fact until Hal mentioned Abin Sur's last words to them. Ganthet then explains that they sent a unit of their best lanterns to Xanshi, but they didn't come back. Hal then explains that the reason they haven't come back is because they've been turned into Yellow Lanterns, and they've seen it happen due to these mysterious yellow power rings. The female Guardian states that such a thing is impossible, as the Quartermite used to forge the rings are long beyond their reach. However, Ganthet mentions how the people of Xanshi's research on the multiverse is what granted them their understanding of it. and wouldn't be surprised if Sinestro somehow found a way to control that technology to reach the planet of Quard. One of the Guardians then points out that if that's true, then it won't be long before he has the power to release Parallax, leading the female Guardian to scold her fellow peer, stating that they are never to say its name. Tomar then states that he thought Parallax was a myth, followed by asking the Guardians how much have they been keeping from the other Green Lanterns. The female Guardian tells Tomar that he's on thin ice and will not talk to them and with such disrespect, but Hal intervenes, stating that if Tomar won't, then he will. One of the Guardians then states that he realizes why Tomar is acting the way he is, as Earth has always poisoned the minds of their fellow Lanterns. Hal then shows confusion at the Guardian's words, with Hal asking what Parallax even is. Gant then explains the concept of the emotional spectrum and how each spectrum possesses a cosmic entity that represents it in the form of various creatures, revealing that Parallax is the entity of the yellow light of fear, and was sealed away within a place called the Antimatter Universe long ago. Tomar then interrupts the conversation in anger, demanding to know why Planet Alo's pleas for help fell on deaf ears. Gant then regrettably explains that the war between the aliens and the Dominators was once seen as a minor break in peace, and decided that one lantern should have been enough to quell the war. However, they knew that Sinestro might show himself if they sent units of lanterns to a place where the fear was great, but didn't anticipate the existence of more yellow lantern rings. Tomar then realizes and states that the Guardian sent them to Alo to die just to see if their hunch about Sinestro was right, to which the female Guardian argues that a soldier dies for the cause they fight for. Such is the nature of keeping the peace. However, Hal questions who they are to decide such things, as they are not gods. The female Guardian then scolds Hal for his arrogance, but Hal stands firm. The female Guardian states that she's had enough of this false lantern, and so snaps her fingers and orders all units of Green Lanterns to apprehend Hal Jordan. As all the Green Lanterns converge in the presence of the Guardians of the Universe, Hal tells them that they're not pawns of the Guardians, but living people who can think for themselves and have a choice. The female Guardian then states that there's no point for Hal to try and convince them to defy orders, as half of them were saved by the Guardians and therefore are indebted to them, or believe in their view of the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. Before anything could happen, however, an army of manhunters and yellow lanterns attack Oa, attempting to assassinate the Guardians of the Universe. A huge battle breaks out with the Green Lanterns fighting against the Yellow Lanterns and Manhunters. After a lengthy battle between the two factions, 4 of the 8 Guardians are killed by the hands of the Manhunter robots and Yellow Lanterns, leaving Ganthet, the female Guardian, and 2 other Guardians left. As it seems that the Yellow Lantern Corps is retreating, one of them shows a construct of Sinestro, who gives a message to Oa and lists planets he plans on invading in multiple sectors, one of which being Earth. The Yellow Lantern Corps and Manhunters take their leave. Moments later, as everyone gets their footing back after dealing with an attack on Oa, Hal states that they need to take the fight to Sinestro on planet Xanshi. However, the female Guardian states that that's exactly what he wants, to leave Oa unprotected so he can attempt to destroy the central power battery, confusing Hal even more. Tomar explains that if the central power battery is destroyed, then all of the power the rings give them will be lost forever. Hal still states that they can't just wait around for the listed planets to get destroyed, including Earth, which is his home world. The female Guardian then aggressively scolds Hal, asking him when he's going to get it yet, that sacrifices for the greater good are sometimes needed to protect the universe, and that includes the very soldiers that fight for them. Hal then looks around, seeing that no one, not even Tomar and Kilowog, are with him in taking the fight to Sinestro, knowing the stakes, that is. Hal then decides to go to Xanshi himself as the Green Lanterns see him go off on his own. Hal then asks his ring to the location of planet Xanshi, to which it points him in the right direction. After a montage of passing planets and sectors, Hal makes it to planet Xanshi, which looks to be a fractured planet, with its debris floating around all around the area. As Hal lands on the planet, he looks around to see a barren and bleak wasteland of a world. Suddenly, Sinestro appears, asking him if it's a horrid sight. Sinestro then states that a world with so much hope were deceived and lied to by the Guardians. Hal's curiosity is piqued, as he asks Sinestro if the Guardians protected this planet. However, Sinestro states that the protection was what they promised, but in the end they left it to die at the hands of a great darkness. Hal then asks Sinestro why he's doing all this, Sinestro replying by asking Hal to follow him, and he will show him why, and so leads Hal to the top side of the planet. Sinestro then presents Hal with a giant, ancient-looking machine, introducing it as the Antimatter Machine. Sinestro then explains that it was created in the hopes of expanding the Guardians' reach across dimensions. However, they didn't anticipate the great darkness that would emerge from this very machine, one that would conquer this planet and rob them of their technology before wiping them out for their resistance. Sinestro then states that the Guardians did nothing but sit on their ivory chairs and watch as one of their most devoted planets died right before their eyes, and felt no remorse for the consequences of their reckless fearlessness. Hal questions why they wouldn't do anything, to which Sinestro responds that the answer is simple: meager superiority, as they thrive on spreading their sense of control and superior intelligence for all to fall under. Sinestro even states that the Manhunters were used to recruit Green Lanterns by putting their species in grave danger, not caring about the lives they risk or cost in the process, but has no more need for them now. Sinestro then goes on to state that their willpower is nothing more than a ploy for power, or itself, and that fear is the universe's only salvation for freedom. Hal asks how fear could ever bring freedom, leading Sinestro to use his ring in order to show a yellow construct reenactment of his backstory. Sinestro first reveals that he was stationed to protect the sector that Xanshi was in, only to witness an armada of apocalyptic ships attacking Xanshi. Despite Sinestro sending out a distress call, no one came to Xanshi's aid, and so witnessed its destruction. In the aftermath, Sinestro pleaded with the Guardians to send the whole Corps to deal with this threat, but his plea fell on deaf ears. So Sinestro put together a rogue team of Green Lanterns, comprised of himself, Abin, and Yalen Gur, that allied themselves with the forces of Earth in order to combat this great darkness. During the battle, however, Sinestro witnessed the death of Yalen Gur, followed by the death of many Green Lanterns around him. This led him to be scared, traumatizing him to the point where fear took over his mind, and his green ring transformed into the first yellow ring. Sinestro utilized this power to its greatest in an attempt for self-preservation, but when Abin saw Sinestro's new power, he acted and quickly defeated Sinestro. Despite the Alliance's victory, and Abin knowledge of the threat fear posed to his Corps' willpower, he decided to spare him and exile him from the Corps, to which Sinestro did not resist. Sinestro then found himself on planet Xanshi, surrounded by death and dismantled Manhunters. Sinestro would begin to hear a voice coming from his ring, which leads him to the destroyed Antimatter Machine. The entity calling from within Sinestro's ring showed him a vision of a peaceful world born of fear, one of subjugation, but true order and peace, as he shows the vision of him ruling over the universe and bringing order and true law to the universe. Back in the present, Hal still doesn't understand how fear could possibly bring peace to the universe, leading Sinestro to explain that fear leads to survival and a sense of self-preservation, meaning that no single person will have to answer to anyone but themselves from there on out, being able to fight for causes they themselves truly believe in. Hal argues, however, that living in fear isn't the same as freedom, that it's just exchanging one set of shackles for another. Sinestro then states that they are the same, but the one difference they have is that Sinestro, just like the Guardians, recognizes that true peace will always require sacrifice. But at least with fear, people still have the power to choose for themselves. In retaliation, Hal unleashes as many constructs as he can at Sinestro, but despite landing a few hits, is still overpowered by Sinestro. As a result of the battle, a piece of the planet breaks off, revealing that way beneath the Antimatter Machine is a newly forged yellow central power battery. Sinestro then explains that eons ago, the Guardians sealed away a powerful being, an entity that represents the emotional spectrum of fear, a being known as Parallax. Sinestro then reveals that with enough fear spread throughout the universe, he can use its energy to fuel the Antimatter Machine and free Parallax from the Antimatter universe. Sinestro then thanks Hal for the stir he created on Oa, for he's done exactly what he wanted. Back on Oa, a lantern begins questioning the Guardians about what they talked about involving Planet Alo and the fallen Green Lantern, angering them and leading them to dodge the question. However, Kilowog begins to argue on behalf of the Green Lantern Corps. The conversation sows seeds of fear throughout the Corps. Just then, Boudica appears over the central power battery of Oa, leading in the Green Lantern Corps to witness her sacrifice herself and fall into the battery. This in turn transforms the green light of willpower into the yellow light of fear, transforming a majority of the Green Lantern Corps into Yellow Lanterns, excluding Tomar, Kilowog, and a few other Green Lanterns as well, who all lose their powers instead of transforming due to their unbreakable willpower. Back on Xanshi, Hal begins to feel the effect of the central power battery's transformation, but instead is depowered, returned to being a regular person. Sinestro then looks upon Hal and notices that his jacket shows that he is a soldier, to which he points out as to how he understands why he didn't change, and so considers Hal a disappointment. Sinestro then fires a beam of yellow light at Hal, leading Hal to fall off a piece of the planet, seemingly falling to his death. Sinestro then hears the phantom voice from his ring, and so activates the Antimatter Machine by powering it with the energy from the yellow light of fear born from both central power batteries. Suddenly, the Antimatter Machine creates what looks to be a prototype, a boom tube, into the antimatter universe, releasing a giant creature made from the yellow light of fear, the entity known as Parallax. Sinestro then offers himself to Parallax as his vessel, leading to his suit transforming into a yellow light-hardened armor. Sinestro then sends a message to his Sinestro Corps, telling them that the first planet they will spread fear in will be Earth in memoriam for his friend Abin. Meanwhile, Hal is nearly seen at death's door, unconscious on a piece of Xanshi. Hal's power ring then spreads a bit of its power to Hal, delving deep into Hal's mind. Within his mindscape, Hal meets with what's left of Abin's consciousness within the ring. Hal apologizes to Abin for all that's happened, and states that everyone was right, that he can't save everyone, and now because of his recklessness, everyone is going to pay the price. Abin states that he, Sinestro, and Yellen grew up together and learned that everything Sinestro explained isn't wrong when it comes to the part about people fighting for causes they don't believe in, but that he fails to recognize those who are fighting for what they believe in. He just never knew it. Abin then states that he learned a long time ago that there's a reason that the emotional spectrum goes hand in hand. Abin states that the emotions aren't meant to be separated, but united, as fear and willpower go hand in hand. Hal, however, reveals that it's never been willpower he's been driven by, but it's the fear that he's driven by, revealing that his biggest fear is losing everyone he cares about after being a soldier and seeing people die around him for so long. Abin expresses that he knows that feeling, but instead of letting the fear control him, he just has to have the willpower to learn from his fears, so he'll know when he's ready to face them. Abin then takes his leave, asking Hal to save his friend before Parallax devours him completely. Abin then transforms into a fish-like entity made out of the green light of willpower. A flash of green light snaps Hal awake in reality, his ring suddenly glowing with power greater than before. Meanwhile, Sinestro leads an army of Yellow Lanterns to Earth, not yet in range of their atmosphere. Just then, a large green light shines in front of them, revealing it to be Hal Jordan as the one and currently only Green Lantern. Sinestro is stunned, questioning how his ring still works. Hal simply states that it seems willpower doesn't come from the central power battery, but from within one's self just as much as fear does. Sinestro orders his entire corps to kill Hal, but Hal retaliates, showing greater power and greater creativity than Sinestro when it comes to the construct he creates as such: vehicles, weapons, and even fictional constructs. In the end, Hal defeats the entire Yellow Lantern Corps single-handedly, angering Sinestro. Sinestro then aggressively asks Hal if he's just devoted to being a soldier for all his life. Hal states that he's no soldier, he's the Green Lantern, Hal then unleashes a hidden power within in his ring, revealing the silhouette of the fish-like entity, with Parallax, voiced by James Earl Jones, speaking through Sinestro, recognizing the entity as the entity of willpower known as Ion. With both entities at their back, Hal and Sinestro fight in an epic battle, leading Hal to finally gain the upper hand on Sinestro. When all seems hopeful, however, Parallax begins to talk through Sinestro and presents Tomar and Kilowog, both being held captive by Parallax. However, Sinestro tries to intervene, stating that he doesn't wish to kill any lanterns but free them from the shackles of the Guardians. Parallax then asserts his dominance over Sinestro's body, revealing that he plans to devour the universe's inhabitants, draining them of their life force through their fear of him. This news makes Sinestro nearly heartbroken, realizing that he's just fallen for another false promise. Hal then decides to unleash a burst of green energy, re-energizing Tomar and Kilowog's lantern rings and giving them their powers back, frustrating Parallax. Parallax then states that if he can't be allowed to devour this universe, then he would rather see it burn. Parallax leads Sinestro's body back to Xanshi, with Hal following behind, but not before informing Tomar and Kilowog to do something for him. Back at Xanshi, Parallax uses its energy to power and attempt to overload the Antimatter Machine, revealing that the chain reaction between matter and antimatter will cause an explosion equivalent to the Big Bang. Hal then catches up with Parallax, informing him that it's over, but Parallax argues that he's won. How could anything be over? Back at Oa, Tomar and Kilowog meet up with the remaining Guardians, who had hidden in the midst of the Yellow Lantern incident. Together, they utilize the green light of willpower in order to transform the central power battery back to being green. The turned yellow lanterns begin to transform back into green lanterns. Parallax can feel the shift in the emotional spectrum, shocked at what has just happened. Despite this, it doesn't stop the Antimatter Machine from activating, causing it to begin to have a meltdown. As their battle continues, Hal utilizes the full power of Ion, freeing Sinestro from Parallax's control, bringing Parallax out into the open. Unexpectedly, the Antimatter Machine suddenly implodes instead of explodes, sucking everything into an unknown destination. Utilizing Ion's power, Hal attempts to contain the implosion, with Parallax getting sucked into the portal. As Parallax gets sucked into the portal, he begins to try and drag Hal down with him. However, Sinestro surprisingly decides to save Hal and decides to hold Parallax back. As Sinestro looks back, still struggling to hold back the implosion, Sinestro states that Hal is a true Green Lantern before using all of his power to send himself and Parallax into the unknown dimension through the implosion. In the end, Hal successfully contains the implosion and it ceases to be by becoming a miniature explosion that destroys the central power battery below. Hal then returns to Oa with minimal damage from the explosion, met with cheers from very few lanterns and surprising stares from the majority of them. The female Guardian and a couple of male Guardians scold Hal, blaming him for everything that's happened. However, Ganthet makes it clear that it was their own ignorance that was to blame, and the only thing Hal is guilty of is bringing all of it to light. The Guardians scold Ganthet on siding against them until the Lanterns step in. The Guardians accept Ganthet, ordering them to stay out of it. However, Hal states that enough is enough, and acknowledges that the universe does need their knowledge, but will not bend to their superiority complex anymore. Hal attempts to make a deal with the Guardians, stating that he will continue to follow their wisdom, but will no longer pick and choose who to save. From here on out, the Lanterns decide how they go about their missions. Ganthet accepts the proposal, but the other three refuse, making the rest of the Green Lanterns decide with Hal, shocking the three Guardians. The female Guardian, enraged, attempts to yell at the Green Lanterns for their insubordination, but her words fall on deaf ears. Tomar then states that while they need the wisdom of the Guardians, they also need not just a leader, but a hero, suggesting Hal Jordan to be the leader that they need. Despite Hal's hesitance, everyone raises their ring to Hal, accepting him as their leader. They may need, as Hal looks down at his ring, ready to shoulder the burden of leading the entirety of the Green Lantern Corps. A month later, John Stewart is ending his day leaving a construction site he's the architect for. Just as he's about to enter his car, John hears his name called out by a familiar voice from behind him. John turns to see Hal in his Green Lantern suit, stating that they've got a lot to talk about. A post-credit scene shows Carol Ferris, who I forgot to mention is played by Jennifer Lawrence, flying the simulator, or Hal was earlier, seemingly during another test flight, but flashes of what happened with Sinestro and happy memories with Hal Jordan begin to haunt her, almost seeming like a form of PTSD. Suddenly, Carol's radar begins to pick up a fast-moving object coming toward the direction of her aircraft. Carol swiftly looks up to see what appears to be something bathed in a violet light, hurtle toward her windshield. The screen goes black as we see a flash of violet light and Carol's voice gasping in response. I hope you guys enjoyed this Green Lantern movie story. I know it's a pretty simple story with a confusing message, but I felt that it was the best I could do for Hal Jordan, especially when it's in the Snyderverse. I also know that I took aspects that John Stewart's Green Lantern could have used, since pieces of his comic storylines were used for Hal Jordan and Sinestro's character arcs, but I feel I had to start the Green Lantern story with Hal Jordan in some way, shape, or form. That was not yet done with him in live action. But don't worry, because the sequel will have John Stewart as the main protagonist. It's just going to be a bit before we reach that point in my version of the DCEU Snyderverse. If you guys enjoy this video, don't forget to like, share, Hulk smash that subscribe button, and comment down below on what you guys thought of this story, whether positive or negative. I appreciate the feedback. I definitely know that this wasn't my best writing, but as I mentioned before, it was currently the best I could do with Hal Jordan. So don't hesitate to be very critical in the comments. Feedback is of vital importance to a writer, no matter how brutally honest it is. Also, don't forget to turn on that notification bell to be notified on any recent videos, and check out our merch store linked in the description and pinned comment section below. You can also find the link to that merch store in our channel page. With all that said and done, I'm JT Anime, and I'll check you guys later, and hashtag must restore the Snyderverse.